is Nicholas Montez, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Nicholas Montez. Welcome back to my YouTube channel for everybody. I'm so excited to have y'all back here together again. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a movie ranking video because this past weekend, the newest Pixar film, Lightyear, also known as one of the other Toy Story spin-offs, has come out in theaters. The first Pixar film to be released in theaters since Onward. So today, I'm going to stop and rank all 26 Pixar films from the worst to the best. An interesting thing about this video is that this is actually my first... Sorry about that, I had to burp. This is actually the first Pixar ranking I'm actually ever doing on this channel, because I've always done tier lists in the past. So this is actually going to be pretty interesting, and hopefully it actually gets downloaded. Now, when I watched Cars 2 before, like a long time ago, I actually really enjoyed it. It had, of course, some of the things I liked about the film, of course, the animation is great, and the way that the action is done, I thought it was great. The problem here is that while it doesn't really, it's just kind of weird how it changes the whole franchise into a action series and makes Mater the main character, and I don't really feel like any of that works. Like, it's kind of like Finding Dory, except it's not as good as Finding Dory, so overall, the movie is just forgettable and not really the best one. So, even though I have some fun when I do go back and watch it, it's not exactly as the greatest when you go back and rewatch it for a movie. Now, Brave is just a film that I feel like just does so much that it tries to be this big, gigantic story. Like, it tries to have this story with a mom and a daughter. She doesn't want to get married, so she turns her mom into a bear, but then they create a relationship. And then you have to do all this other stuff. And it's like, you don't really understand the theme when you get to the end. And that's very frustrating when it comes to this film. So, granted, obviously, the things I love about it, of course, the music and the animation, it's of course amazing because it's Pixar. But at the same time, and some people say that when they watch this movie, it doesn't feel like a Pixar film. Personally, I don't understand where you're coming from with that. That just sounds like ludicrous to me, but whatever. I still think that the movie is watchable whenever I watch it, but it's not the best story. Now, much like Brave, the movie has some redeeming qualities. Of course, the animation is simply fantastic. Whenever they're doing water, it looks absolutely real. Most of the shots of, like, the mountains, I think, are absolutely beautiful. And even the little music cues that feel like a western in a way. And there's even some shots of the sky that feel very like I'm watching a comic book come to life, though it's not a comic book movie, it's a Pixar film. However, the movie just feels a little bit the premise of what if the meteorite that killed all the dinosaurs missed, and like how would that be? Like you have like dinosaurs, you know, building a farm together and building like this whole family, and I mean it's a cool story. Don't get me wrong, the relationship between the boy and the dinosaur, it's cute. I liked it. It's just that sometimes it just feels a little bit too obvious, like you're doing something, like it doesn't feel like a clever Pixar film because it feels like something that's already been done before. And even the scene where they're like doing drugs and stuff, like not exactly the best thing. And so I don't know, it feels very different from all the Pixar films, as it doesn't really feel like a good Pixar movie to me. But at the same time, whenever I go back and rewatch it, I still really enjoy it. So I enjoy it rather than I actually like it, like the story. Now, this was actually a pretty good sequel to come back for the Cars franchise. When I first watched it, I was like, this is actually my favorite of the franchise, and I think it has some redeeming qualities and giving Lightning McQueen, like the focus back on racing and Lightning McQueen, and the way they actually kind of did the story of him, of using that, Rocky 3 kind of story of him like feeling doubtful and not wanting to race anymore because he's down about what's been going on and like what if he didn't race anymore. And I feel like that story works for what the character is at this point in time. And the Cruz Ramirez character I thought was pretty good. However, when it comes to the third act, however, with the plot twist of her going into the race and her winning, and then Lightyear McQueen changing his whole color background, just feels kind of like a weird plot line and never really was interesting to me. Though I still kind of enjoyed it still. Now, WALL-E, I would probably say that this is like one of the most boring Pixar films I've ever seen. Now, obviously, the movie is beautiful. It has great shots. And Lightyear is probably the closest coming to this film. But for me, like, the relationship between Eve and WALL-E is great. It's cute and everything, but, like, the specific story, it's kind of like Good Dinosaur, where it's just so quiet. And that I feel like that this movie would work better as a short film rather than an actual full-length movie, because this movie just goes on for too long, and I don't really think it needed to happen. And I don't really understand the whole point of this movie was, so unfortunately, it's not very good for me. Now, of all the 6 original Pixar films, I would say that this is actually pretty good. Of course, the characters are likable. The story of Flick, being hated, so he wants to go get this group of warrior bugs to protect his ant colony. It's a cool little story. It has a story that I think is familiar and stuff that we kind of see in later movies in Pixar. But at the same time, the animation definitely hasn't aged very well. The movie is sort of forgettable, and the movie is also very violent at times, especially when, like, the grasshopper is beating up Flick, and he, like, gets a black eye. Like, that's crazy. But it's a good movie. I still really enjoy it, and yeah, so it's a pretty good film. Now, this is another pretty good, solid sequel from Pixar that I thought that the way they did it was pretty cool. And basically telling the story of Mike Wazowski and Sully, of how they met, I thought that was pretty interesting. And the way that they're all working together, I thought was really cool. The score from Michael Giacchino, once again, he did the score for most of these Pixar films, for like The Incredibles and Lightyear. And so Michael Giacchino, I'd probably say Michael Giacchino is like one of the best guys to do a movie score, because he's not only has he done Monsters University, The Incredibles, and Lightyear, but he's also done films like The Batman and Spider-Man, and I believe Planet of the Apes. So I'm like, this is an amazing guy, and you hear the score when he's doing it, and it's just awesome. Once again, the characters in the university, they're likable. The story itself and the theme I thought was pretty cool. I guess when it comes to the bad is that it basically makes it like basically just a fun movie, rather than really telling like a classic Pixar film. It's just meant to be there. I don't know. I had fun with it still. I still love to rewatch it. I just don't really, like, whenever a new Pixar movie comes out, I feel like they're meant to represent an idea. And that's not really what this film is. It just presents fun. So I still think a fun movie is pretty good. Now, this is a movie that I think is a pretty good sequel to Finding Nemo, as it basically, it's kind of like Cars 2, except the side character is a lot better, well done, as you get Dory in the lead, who uses the plot line that was in the first movie, and that was a joke in the first movie, and now they're using it as one of the main plot lines. And to be honest with you, I thought the way they did that was really cool, and even the stuff with her parents and the emotional stuff in that, I thought was really cool, and the arc that Dory is going on was really fun. And even though it's similar to what Finding Nemo did, except it's a lot different, and you're taking place into this like big gigantic aquarium, I still think it's really fun. The characters are fun, especially with Bailey, Destiny, Hank, the octopus, or at least they call it in the movie the Septopus. There's also a lot of Disney World vibes, especially since you have talking with Crush, and sometimes the Nemo characters would, Dory characters would come in to talk with Crush, or even you got an aquarium there, and you even get to see like not dolphins. Well, actually, you get to see dolphins after you get off the Nemo ride. So yeah, this movie gives me a lot of Disney World vibes, Epcot vibes. But yeah, that's my personal thoughts on Finding Dory. Now, this is another Pixar film that I think was actually really well done. Of course, the animation is stunning. The characters of Luca and Alberto are, of course, very likable and charming. The new girl, Julia, I thought was pretty fun. Her dad was pretty fun. The movie overall is pretty good. I don't necessarily say if I could say anything like specific details about it, because the thing is that obviously when I reviewed it for the first time about a year ago, matter of fact, the day I'm filming this is the anniversary when, like, it's the 1-year anniversary of when Luca came out, and like, I liked it, but at the same time, there's not really anything really memorable I can really say about it that I can talk about. But I can just say that it's a good film. Now, this was a movie that is probably going over everyone's Disney Plus page, as when they announced this movie, I was like, okay, I'm excited for it. Just need a trailer to see what's going on. And then I saw the trailers and I was like, this looks like such a weird movie. Why is this girl turning into a red panda when she gets excited? Like, what's that got to do with anything? And when I watched the movie, and it's a little bit relatable in a sort of sense. Now, obviously, I'm not a 13 teenage girl. Obviously, I'm not gonna deal with periods and all this stuff and awkwardness and your parents and rock boy bands. But at the same time, like, I've seen how girls are like this in real life, so it's kind of relatable in a sort of sense. Likewise, the animation is also really good. I think the way they actually do it, this is like to the point in time where they can really do anything with animation these days. And then, of course, the characters are pretty likable. So I think it tells a familiar Pixar story, and they actually do it really well. So the newly released Pixar film is at number 16, and I personally really enjoyed it. First off, I love the arc that we get with with this new version of Buzz Lightyear, as he basically, the whole movie, he's just trying to complete his mission of trying to get all the Space Rangers back home, because this is his mistake, and he has to make it right. And there's probably some relations to what Captain America would do. He'll do anything it takes to protect his country. There's a lot of similarities to that, if you could say. Chris Evans plays great as Buzz Lightyear in the role. The action sequences, the animation are absolutely amazing. Whenever Buzz Lightyear is flying up in space is great. The new side characters with Izzy, Darby, and the guy that was played by Taika Waititi, which I don't remember his name. All were pretty good side characters, and even Socks the cat I thought was great. And then, of course, I think one of the best things about this movie is the Buzz Lightyear moments, whether it's the callbacks to the Toy Story films with the lines, or even when he gets the laser on his hand and he gets the wings in the ejection seat and he's like, "Not today, Zurg," and he blasts him, and I'm like, yes, go! Buzz Lightyear moments, let's go! However, as much fun as I had with this film as it is an action space adventure from Pixar, there are issues because I never was a big fan of the Zurg villain, as it ruined the joke that they made in Toy Story 2 in not making him his father, but making him the future version of Buzz Lightyear from another timeline. And I'm like, this is cool, but like, you could have done something better. Like, you want to erase everything. Like, it's evil. I get it. It's evil. But it's like, it feels like something we've already seen before, and I kind of wish we could have gotten like a Darth Vader or something with Zurg. And I also wish he wasn't a robot. I wish that he could have been a little bit more smaller, like the way the size of the toy is. but that's just my personal preference. Overall, I think the movie is really good. And even though it's at number 16 on my list, it just means that there's a lot more better Pixar films than this one. Now, this was a Pixar film that when I first saw it, I was like, well, not when I first saw it, but like I saw it when it came out on Disney Plus, and I was like, this is actually a pretty good film. I personally really enjoyed it. I love the relationship between Ian and Barley, how that relationship comes into play. I also really like the animation and the action sequences, but I love the theme that it really just, that sometimes I feel like it's a lot more relatable because your bigger siblings can be your parent figures. Because if you don't know, when I was younger, my parents would work, and my sister would babysit me like most of the time, so she's kind of like my second mom if you really think about it. Not saying that my parents haven't been here, they've always been here. It's not like they have any issues or anything. My sister just happens to spend a lot of time with me and taking care of me. So, you can definitely say that she was a mom figure in that way. But yeah, I personally really like it, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just solid Pixar. Now, when I first watched Cars, I was like, this movie's not that very good. But then I rewatched it last summer, and I'm like, this movie's actually pretty good. Like, I like the characters, I like the story, the animation and the racing scenes are pretty cool. And while the premise of the movie is not that great, the story is what makes the movie so good. Like, because the premise is just weird. Talking cars and them doing, like, human things and racing. Obviously, if they made a movie about cars, racing would definitely be the thing that they would be doing. But, overall, you know, the story with Lightning McQueen that they do for him, I thought was okay. It was fine. But overall, the film is pretty solid. Now, I know a bunch of you absolutely love this movie, and a bunch of you put it as, like, your favorite Pixar film of all time. I get it. The problem here is, like, I just can't get into the story of this movie. Now, granted, the movie presents, I think this is one of those Pixar movies that just presents complete entertainment. Whether it's with the family and them having interesting powers and the action sequences that happen throughout it, and basically it's like the best Fantastic Four film we've ever gotten, as most of the people in this family have the powers of these superheroes. Mr. Incredible has the powers of the Thing, Elastigirl has the powers of Mr. Fantastic, Violet has the powers of Invisible Woman, and, you know, Dash doesn't have, obviously there's no Human Torch, but it's close to a Fantastic Four film. Just all of it was really good. The animation, pretty good. The action's pretty good. The score from Michael Giacchino is, of course, a classic score from the Pixar movies. So there's a lot of things I still like in it, and then, of course, that classic line, "Where's my super suit?" Classic joke. All that works. The problem here is that the story just doesn't really feel like inspirational. It doesn't really feel like impactful for a superhero story. And also the villain never really interested me, as it just copies what most of these other villains did in basically wanting revenge on the hero. Overall, the movie is pretty good, but not great Pixar. Now, this is a movie that I thought was great for this was one of the best Pixar sequels that we've ever gotten. First off, I would say if Lightyear was the true Buzz Lightyear movie, Toy Story 2 is the definitive better Buzz Lightyear film. Because this whole film is dedicated to Buzz Lightyear fandom. Whether it's the opening sequence where you have that Buzz Lightyear video game, and he's on that planet flying with his wings and the blue utility belt. He fights Zurg. There's lots of moments where he's with the team and he's fighting them. All that's great. But the personal stuff with Jesse, I thought was great. Stinky Pete was a great villain. Al from Al's Toy Barn, great villain, especially that he played Tarzan, Tantor in Tarzan a couple months later. Well, actually, I think a couple months before, because I think Tarzan came out first in 1999 in Toy Story 2. I don't know. let's see. And once again, it just tells another interesting story from this franchise, as it has more interesting themes where he wouldn't miss it for in Andy growing up for the world, and it's just another great solid story. The problem here is that it just does too much. That Toy Story was just a simple story, so I'm a little disappointed with that. But I gotta be honest with you, much like The Incredibles, it's just another rewatchable Pixar film that I absolutely love. Now, when I first watched this movie, I was a little bit mixed because they basically did so much in this film. But if at the same time, it kind of does what Toy Story 2 did, except they made it a whole lot better. Like, you start off the movie, the couple of minutes with the whole opening sequence of saving the toy to RC, and then Bo has to go, and it's like, it sets up this whole arc for Woody as he is meant to help a child, and so when he leaves the gang at the end, he will bring joy to many kids around the world, or at least in the carnival that they're in. Likewise, I just love the little details that they put into everything, whether it's the animation, or even the little nods to certain things like the Mickey Mouse phone, or even little generations of toys in this antique store that they go to. And then the new characters like Duke Boom and Gabby Gabby, which I think is one of the best Pixar Toy Story villains ever. Even Giggle McDimples I thought was pretty cool. All that was great. Even Forky's a nice, interesting character. I thought all that was great. However, it still has issues though. I never was a fan of what they did with Buzz. I just think that making him stupid and using his buttons to basically get him around places, when Buzz Lightyear is just like in Toy Story 2, he's literally like being a space ranger, being the leader that he's always been. And it's like, it's just so weird in the way they do that, and I just don't think that's very good. But likewise, I still think this is a great Pixar Toy Story sequel. Now, this is a Pixar film that I feel like that when they did it, I was like, this is a film that does a lot, but there's just so much to like about it. Like, the story here, it just does so much with developing this whole world of Mexican culture and family and music and making shoes. It is this whole family story, and I really, really like it. The animation is absolutely gorgeous. The music, the songs are absolutely great. And then, of course, once again, another film that the score did by Michael Giacchino, which he's just a legend. He's just a legend in doing music. The characters are likable. The plot twist itself, I actually did not see coming, and it made a lot more sense. And I was like, okay, I'm invested into this movie now. That's a great plot twist. But overall, as it does a lot in just one movie, I still think that the movie is very good. Now, this is a Pixar film that I saw it in school, and I didn't see the full thing, and I'm like, what is the whole point of this movie, of this rat going in a man's hair to help him cook food? And they actually make it one of the best Pixar films up to date, where as it is directed by Brad Bird, it has all these clever action sequences for the film, and they actually make it work. And likewise, the animation, I think, is pretty stunning. The theme of making food and like everybody can cook, I thought was really cool. And it's just such a great story, and when you're just going along, it's just a great story to explore. So I think this is one of Pixar's best films. Now, I know a bunch of you absolutely love the original Incredibles more, but for me, I actually like the second Incredibles just a whole lot more. And the reason for that is just because they just tell a more interesting story. The characters have more moments, especially what they do with Jack Jack and Elastigirl, as they put Elastigirl in the front center and leave Mr. Incredible and Bob handling the kids at home. And then of course Jack is of course very hilarious when especially when he fights the raccoon. All that's great. The movie is also very hilarious. The action sequences, especially with the new animation style they're doing, all that is absolutely wonderful. And once again, the score for Michael Giacchino is of course amazing. And I also just feel like it's a lot more safer, and the story makes a lot more sense to what the first film did. And I just think that it is just like an incredible film of what they did, and I just think it was better, and the villain is actually better in my opinion. Now, the first 10 minutes of this movie is probably some of the most emotional stuff that Pixar has ever done. And I'm not saying that because everybody else was saying it. I'm saying it because it's a true state fact. And I'm amazed to how great this movie told with its story. As it tells this story of an old man going through life, love, depression, and he's just this depressed man as he fell in love with this girl. He went through life, and it's all over. And I'm like, when he looks at the book, it's like you feel emotional for him, and it's like, oh, it tugs the heartstrings so emotionally. And this is probably one of the most emotional Pixar films ever. Granted, there's another film I want to talk about that is actually more emotional, literally. You'll understand I joke when I say it again. But likewise, the characters and the other stuff is actually pretty good. I'm one of those people that thinks that the first 10 minutes isn't as... I think the first 10 minutes is actually better than the rest of the movie as a whole. But the rest of the movie is still really good. Though the villain itself is not the best, I still absolutely love the movie. Now, this is a film that I just think does something spectacular, where it tells a story that it has this premise of monsters basically scaring children so that way they can power their city, and it makes for an interesting concept as you have these two monsters, if Mike and Sully, played by John Goodman and Billy Crystal. I think they have great chemistry together. It's also very hilarious. The story itself is really good. It's also emotional when you get to the end of the film. And even there's just some sweet moments you probably feel like they shouldn't be doing this. And when they change it to laughter at the end, it just makes for a great movie with a great premise, great characters, and it's just a great movie overall. Now, this is a movie that when I first watched it, I was like, this is pretty good. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'm going to rewatch it again, but I enjoyed it. But then I rewatched it last summer, and this film connected with me on a bigger level, as the theme of this movie is really good, as it really has two main themes. If you're passionate about something, go ahead and do it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That if you have something you're passionate about, then that's your purpose. And then also, I love the other theme but then at the same time, you also gotta watch out for stuff, because one day you're here and then you're not. So you gotta take life at a time. And I just love that theme about the movie. It's just so inspirational. So I love it. And then likewise, the character obviously tells a familiar Pixar story. And of course, the animation is of course amazing. The characters are pretty good. And then once again, this is also a collection to one of my Pixar movies to eat while you're watching it, because the pizza in it looks pretty good, honestly, as well as the other snacks and stuff. But overall, the movie itself is actually very, very good. Now, if you're wondering where that joke for most emotional Pixar film came from, literally, this is the film I was talking about, Inside Out. It literally just takes a premise that is so creative of taking your emotions and taking a familiar story, but making it one of the best stories told for children and families all over the place. And I just think it's one of the greatest stories ever told, as they tell this familiar story of basically telling through puberty, and it's like it's like it's so clever in the way it's done, and at the same time, it also makes you feel every single emotion. It makes you happy. It makes you, but most of the time, it makes you want to cry your eyes out, especially when the girl cries. It just like it pulls you out, and the music is also great. The characters, and you even get sad when an imaginary friend dies, and it's like this is a true emotional roller coaster. Now, and also, I think the other thing I want to talk about here is that not many people talk about how good the animation is for this movie, and the animation is literally amazing. Like, it's simply stunning. Like, the little specks on the characters, I think is great, and the way that it looks all colorful with all the memories and stuff looks great, and the music itself is also really good too. So the original Pixar film that kicked off this entire franchise, I still think is one of the absolute greatest films of this whole series. Of course, it introduces the characters of Buzz and Woody as these two characters where Buzz thinks he's a space ranger, he's a superhero, he's the actual Buzz Lightyear, the Buzz Lightyear that we thought it was him, and he thinks he's on a stranded planet. And then you have Woody, who just who doesn't matter if he's played with. He wants to be there for his kid. And the two characters that they have together, the character arcs that they have, the relationship they have together, all that was well done. The score for it, I think, is absolutely fantastic, in the way that it spirals throughout all the other Toy Story films is amazing. All the other characters with Rex, Slinky Dog, Mr. Potato Head, Bo Peep, the block guys that eat each other, like, all that was great. And so, while it's not exactly as flashy or other Pixar movies, the movie itself is one of the greatest Pixar films of all time, and will always be one of the greats. So for me, this is the definitive great Toy Story sequel, where it basically takes place years after Andy is done playing with the toys. Most of the gang is here, and it's just the theme of that Andy is going to college. And even though, and I love that theme of the movie, that whether it's at college or in the attic, their job is to be there for their kid, even though they might not get played with. But that's not the main theme. They have to be there for their kid. Likewise, Lotso is a great Toy Story villain, probably one of the best villains, but I like Gabby a little bit more. And then of course, just the ending where you get Bonnie and Andy playing with his toys for the last time. It's just such an emotional stuff. And then there's even a scene where you think that the toys are actually gonna die, and it also has that like Ratatouille factor where throughout the entire movie you're going through the story, and it's like you care about the characters, and it's just such a great story being told, and it's an emotional way to end the Andy trilogy. So I absolutely love Toy Story 3. Now, this is just one of the great Pixar films of all time. First off, it's just a comfort movie. I mean, the music and the animation is simply stunning. But what makes the movie so good is that it tells this story of a father and a son. As it's basically about a father and a son, where a father is so overprotective of his son because of what happened with his mom, with his wife. And so he has to stay alert. And so he realizes that he can actually do this stuff. Like, he's actually a brave kid, so I think he knows what he's doing. And so I love that theme of the movie. It's just so relatable, especially for me. Well, not exactly for me, but like as a kid, I think all dads would relate to this, especially as I'm talking about this the day before Father's Day. All that was great. Likewise, the characters are great. It's incredibly rewatchable. The animation is simply stunning. And this is by far one of the best Pixar films they have ever put out. And so I absolutely love Finding Nemo, and that's why it is my favorite Pixar film of the bunch. And that's my ranking of all 26 Pixar films. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All my social media stuff is in the About section over there. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.